Understanding what type of leader you are is the key for yours and your team's and your business's success. Understanding if you're an evangelist type leader or an operational leader, or maybe you're a negative leader or a selfish leader. But understanding that is going to be key because then it allows you to surround yourself with the right type of people. Well, today I'm really excited. My interview with Paul Daly, who is a serial entrepreneur who built his first company, sold it. He's now on to his next company, and he explains to us how understanding that about himself, what type of leader he was, allowed him to surround himself with the right type of people. And now his second business is even more successful. So let's get into today's episode and my interview with Paul Daly. Well, hi, and welcome back to another episode of You're in Charge, Now What? As you know, this channel is being built to help those of you that find yourself now in charge of a team, a division, a project, or even a business, build the skills necessary to develop and lead high-performing teams. Each week, we're going to focus on one topic. I'm going to bring in a guest a lot of times, and we're going to talk about one thing in order to share some strategies that have helped both of us build our businesses so that you can apply them to generate consistent results and increase the bottom line of your business. So let's dive into today. I am so excited to bring my friend Paul Daly into the show so we can chat about it. I have a lot of respect for Paul. Met him a few years. We've just really connected. And so I think he's going to bring a lot of value to you. So Paul, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. It's always great to spend a few minutes with you whenever I can. You're literally one of my first friends in the greater automotive industry.
Yeah, I know. I asked you the other day about that, how we met, because I kept thinking to myself, where was it? And then all of a sudden when you said, oh, it was the conference and we talked, I was like, that's what it was. And we just clicked. We sat there and we just chatted, and I walked away, or you walked away, and I just said, that's someone I have to stay in touch with. It felt like we knew each other for a very long time.
You're also one of the very few people in the greater automotive industry that's ever been to my house.
Yeah. And
come on, how great is that? That's a real relationship. When you know where someone's bathroom is, you're really friends.
So before we jump into everything, why don't you take a couple seconds to explain who you are, a little bit about yourself, and then we'll dive into what we want to chat about today.
Absolutely. So my name is Paul Daly. I go by Paul. J Daly is kind of what I did because there are other Paul Dalys that aren't me. So the J helps. I am a first generation entrepreneur that grew up in a very blue collar family in Philadelphia. No entrepreneurial experience in my family. Ventured out away from Philly. First one to go to college. I thought I was going to go into ministry. Instead, I started a business. It was an automotive reconditioning business in 2003. Built that business over the course of 15 years. It was acquired, started incubating a creative agency within it, started producing content for social media and gathering community. So I lead a company, CEO of a company. I put out a lot of content on social media, try to gather people around common beliefs so that we can help each other get better. Family man, wife, 4 kids, the whole thing.
There you go. All good. So even in that little bit, we're going to unpack a lot, because it's very funny that you say, and I think we have very similar, meaning there was no entrepreneurial design in my family, meaning my father worked, blue collar, very blue collar. We had 5 boys, but there were entrepreneurial things we had to do as blue collar kids in order to get money. If you wanted, I always tell the story. My father, if I wanted a bike or a pair of sneakers or something, he would be able to say, I can give you this much, which gets you that bike. But if you want that bike, you have to go out and earn some money. So it was either your allowance or shoveling snow, raking leaves, lemonade stands, everything to sort of hustle to make some money.
Yeah. It's I'll get you to Kmart, but if you want Nike, right?
Yeah.
You're working, right?
I remember it was if you wanted to.
Remember Kmart?
Bike. Yes, of
Remember Kmart?
course, of course. I go back even older, pre-Kmart, when we used to buy our clothes at Sears, and so Sears would be like
I remember that.
you could get the Sears bike, but if you wanted the Schwinn bike, then you had to
That's
go
right.
out and you had to go hustle a little bit.
That's
So
back when Schwinn wasn't like when Schwinn was like the thing.
yeah, Schwinn was the thing. Now everyone's like, ah, Schwinn. You're going, no,
Yeah.
Schwinn was really exciting back then. So talk to me about, so what I wanted to chat with you about and what I think you can bring value to the audience about is this concept of, you know, you started something, right? And so I always say people end up in the leadership, or in charge of something. Even if it's not leadership, you're in charge of something.
Mhm.
And either you're put there because you have to be, you're assigned it, now you're in charge of this, or you say, no, I'm stepping up to the plate and do that. So talk to me about the first company, because, why? Meaning, why start something if you didn't have the entrepreneurial example, so to speak?
Mhm.
What made you go, that's the route I want to go? And talk a
Yeah.
little bit about how you sort of plotted that out and implemented it.
Yeah. That'll be great. I think you just said something interesting, like somebody's putting you in charge of something. So like, where does that start? So thinking of, I started thinking of my first business, thinking of maybe a couple roles that weren't business related, that were in other organizations where I maybe became in charge of something.
Right.
Um, I would say that what in that minute when you said that, I started thinking like, oh, why did I get put in charge of anything? And when you start your own business, you're kind of putting yourself in charge of something,
Right.
right? But really, I think the founding principle is that no one who has any leadership ability at all, if anyone who is worth their weight in leadership, they're going to make sure that someone's in charge of themselves before they put them in charge of something else. And so I think being put in charge of something starts with taking responsibility, being in charge of yourself and
Right.
your own motivations and your own outcomes. And like your background and my background really started us off in life, like, oh, you want that? Well, you have to be in charge of yourself enough to get to that. And so like that school of hard knocks, or that school, maybe not hard knocks, the school of like just not being it, having it given to you, kind of sets you up. And entrepreneurs oftentimes are set up not like a entrepreneur, but like a true entrepreneur who's willing to go get it, doesn't expect it to be
Right.
handed to him. So like based on that, I wanted flexibility. And I wanted to be able to, at the time, I wanted to go and serve a church, but I
Right.
did not want to have to draw a salary and be a burden on the church. So I knew I had to find a way that I wasn't working, in a rigid Monday through Friday or Monday through Saturday schedule to do it. So that's what initially said, okay, I think I can do this and be in charge of myself to make what I wanted to happen
Right.
through the mechanism of starting a business. So I was working at a car dealership at the time. It was the first new car dealership I'd ever been in. Gentleman named Chris Burrett Chevrolet in Oswego, New York. He said, I have an opening for a service advisor. I think you'd be a good fit. I said, I don't have any automotive experience. He said, I have technicians that know about cars. I need someone that knows about people and can be responsible. So I took the job. About 3 months in, everything was going great. I loved it. I loved working with the techs. I loved working with the customers.
Right.
A friend of mine was doing wheel repair in Maryland. He was doing the same thing that I wanted to do, like serving a church and working and making great money. So I went down, checked it out. I brought it actually to my boss, the owner of the dealership, which was a little awkward, but he taught
Right.
me my first leadership lesson. He said, if you care about your people, you want to do what's best for them, not what's best for you. He said, I think you'll do great at this. You should do it. We walked out to the wholesale line. He gave me a $400 1987 Chevy Astro, rusted out, oil pan leaking, everything.
Right.
And he's like, there you go, kid, go get it. And so, so that was kind of why and how I started. And then I just, again, taking charge of yourself, I just started making mistakes, reading a lot, and swinging the axe.
So I think that's interesting, the way you're phrasing it is because I was very similar. I, went to college. I was working with my dad in the summers. He was a civil engineer working for an organization, one of those companies that provided concrete and asphalt, for, people to build the roads and everything else like that. And
Yep.
I would work summers and I could have had a job there and I could have stayed the whole time. And I
Yep.
just kept seeing to myself, my mind said, I can't see myself doing this for 20 or 30 years. And I
Yep.
wanted to be an actor. So
Yep.
I've said, well, if you're going to do this, then you have to go into New York and figure it out. And same thing,
Yep.
you make a lot of mistakes. But I
Hmm.
think to your point is, it's also when you find the right people for your team, when you ask them certain questions, are they people that are going to blame other people or do they take responsibility? And I was always, and to your point is, if I went back and looked at all the jobs I had, whether I had the title or not, for some way I always ended up in charge of something because I took responsibility, accountability, and people sort of gravitated to you. So it becomes
Hmm.
it's an innate sense. I think leadership can be taught, but I think you have to have that willingness to
Hmm.
learn, move forward, and like you said, care about the team more than you care about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. Yeah, when you see somebody who takes responsibility for themselves, whatever organization they are in, any leader is going to recognize that and be like, "Here, can you do this too? Actually, could
Yeah.
you do this too?" Right, which is a really good sign.
Well, it can be, but it can also be taking advantage. And I think that's one of the mistakes sometimes what that
True.
I've done growing businesses,
Hmm.
being either the one doing it or
Hmm.
being the one who just says, well, I'll take on more. You have to be, I think we all have to be careful of that, of overburdening the capable people at the
Yep.
expense of not holding other people accountable to what they're
That's so
supposed to do.
true. Oh yeah,
You
it can't
know,
be an enabling thing.
right.
Yeah,
Right.
without a
So,
doubt.
as you built the company, right? So you went from the Astro van to pretty successful
A
company.
2004 Scion XB was the next one, which is a weird decision, but okay. Yeah.
So then you ended up. So now you end up, and you have staff, and you have a really good business. It's doing everything that you had hoped it would do, meaning flexibility, generating revenue,
Mhm.
helping other people by adding to them to the team. And then all of a sudden someone comes to you and says, "Hey, I think I'd like to buy your company from you."
Mhm.
What's that feel like in terms of accomplishment,
Mhm.
fear? What do I do after? I mean, as we pivot as people who are in charge, of, like you said, I agree that sense of self. I think the best leaders, even within a company, if you're running a team, how do you pivot to something that's going to help, or a business person saying, I got to go this way? For you, what was that decision process like to basically think, well, if I dump this all and yay, we get some money, what's next?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I had never ended up getting that flexibility that I was looking for. First of all, if you want flexibility in your business, stay by yourself. Just be a great technician or
Right.
great at whatever you do, and take your flexibility. The second you start having an obligation to other people and growing, your flexibility is out the window. So I never really got that flexibility over the 15 years, but I decided, probably halfway through that, like my place in the world was in business.
Right.
So I actually stopped looking for that flexibility and I kind of reformatted my thinking. But getting to that point was a measure of saying, I need to build an organization that runs without me.
Yes.
Meaning you have to have systems and processes in place, which is a big shift for me. I'm not naturally a systems and processes kind of guy. I'm the visionary type CEO. I'm what they would label as the evangelist. I like to gather people together
Right.
and tell them why we should be together and make them feel good for being together. When it comes down to like operations and financials and uh, hiring and interview, like all that stuff is very difficult. It's definitely the challenging side. So knowing late, it wasn't until late, probably a few years before the sale, that I got really serious about having tight financials and having
Right.
tight processes that were repeatable and replicable. And
Right.
so those last few years were essential because when the acquisition offer came in, and it came out of nowhere, wasn't expected. I got a call one morning at 10 o'clock from the CEO of Dent Wizard, then CEO of Dent Wizard International, Terry Kebby, and he just talked to me and just said, "Hey, what would it look like if we could work together?" And I was like, "What exactly does that mean?" And he said, after giving me all these compliments and how they've been noticing what we've been doing, and we ran a really great company, so we kind of created a black hole for them
Right.
where we occupied, and so at that point, what does that exactly mean? He says, well, we'd like to see if you'd be interested in selling your company to us. And so at that point, I have to say, it did feel good. Um, it didn't feel good. It felt very scary. It felt very emotional. It felt
Right.
very serious to me. I
Mhm.
think any leader that cares a lot about their people really does put their people's future and hold it in high regard.
Right.
My wife and I, went out to breakfast to talk about it the next day or a couple of days later as we were starting to kind of work through what it, like even considering it. And I started talking about it. I couldn't even get three sentences out without starting to choke up. And she goes, "You
Yeah.
should probably just tell them no, because I don't think you're going to be able to do this." And so, but as I work through it as a leader, as a CEO, I always told my people and tell my current team, my obligation is to make decisions that create the most amount of opportunity for the most amount of people. And when I
Right.
took a long, hard look at what I saw happening in the auto industry, the consolidation that I saw, the need for reconditioning companies to offer more holistic solutions,
Mhm.
we had just built a paint division, and it took a lot of money. It took a lot of time, much more of both than I thought it would.
Right.
I asked myself the question, like, can I keep up? And so I came to it like, can I keep it capitalized? Can we
Right.
keep up with the pace of change? What does this mean for my team? Who, when you have a small company, or I don't know what you would consider, but we were getting close to 50 people spread
Right.
out across the Northeast. It's like, well, how much room is there for the young people to move into like management and leadership? If it's just us, like they're just people stayed, they didn't leave the company, so there's this
Right.
big bottleneck. Like this person can't move up unless we really grow or if somebody leaves, and that wasn't happening. So
Right.
as I was like, am I really creating opportunity if I don't know if I can keep up with the pace of change, and these people who have learned and growing as leaders don't have anything to lead? And
Right.
so that decision, I wouldn't talk to them until I went out and met them. I said I have to. So I flew out to St. Louis. I met their executive team. I really observed how people in the company treated one another, and determined that like actually there are a lot of aligned values and a lot of opportunity. And so did make the decision to sell. And so like, but it was not this. I wasn't building a company to sell. I was building a company to build a company. And so it was a very emotional time.
Right.
um and there's a lot of judgment, I think, that I wrestle with, like, of people pleasing, and on a personal level, like, what are people going to think about me if I think, it's like the band that you love that now signed to Sony BMG Records, and you're like, he
Right.
sold out to the man, and people think that like you did it for money, right? Like money is definitely a part of the transaction, and
Sure.
knowing what you're going to do next with it. My family has sacrificed for 15 years. So like that's definitely a consideration. But really, I wish I had it with me. I have a picture from of the entire team on the day the handoff happened, and everybody. It's my favorite picture of the company. There's lots of smiles. They're all natural smiles, and I show that picture sometimes. I say, "Does this look like a group of people that feel like they just got sold out?"
Right.
And the answer is no. So very emotional, but very good. And I mean, in hindsight, you know what I mean? Like that would have been a really difficult business to be in right now. So,
Right.
in hindsight, I look like a genius, but at the time, I just wanted to be responsible to, my obligations and what I say and believe.
Yeah. And there's a couple things in there. So, for the audience, there's a couple things that you touched on. And one was that idea of knowing yourself. And it's been a common theme just in our conversation right here. I think people who are in charge have to understand, and sometimes it's not easy to understand until a couple years or multiple years of what you're good at.
Yeah.
When I was an actor, people would always say, "What can you do? What roles are you good at?" And you go, "Everything," because you just want to be hired. Until I met some older actors who said, "No, you want to be really good at one thing to get in the door, and
Yeah.
then you can do this." But you know, Brian and I, who work together in the company, Brian tends to be more like you in terms of, I would say he's more the visionary, let's go, I
Yep.
got a new idea, and
Evangelist.
he's the evangelist, and I'm on the
Mhm.
other side, and I like the processes and the structure and
How you actually get things done.
exactly. So we always used to joke is that Brian would have an idea, throw it over his shoulder, I'd catch it and I'd build it. Right. So now he's gotten me to be a little more of an evangelist,
Yep.
and I've gotten him a little systematized. But
Hmm.
knowing that, and then you can hire. But I think a really good leader understands that and lets that go.
Yeah.
Right, lets that
Yep.
go and says, "I'm supposed to be the event for you. I'm the evangelist. But if I get tied up too much in something else, then I'm really not maximizing what I'm supposed to be doing well." And I think that that's a
Yeah.
pro. When you're small, you have to do everything, But as you
Absolutely.
expand out, you should start identifying yourself. And for all of you listening who are running teams or even a business, one of the best pieces of advice I got early on in my career was your job as a leader is to train yourself out of a job.
Mhm.
Train yourself out of a job. You should be training yourself, someone on your team or whatever, to do what you do so then you can do more. Because if you're only going to get stuck there, or you're afraid and you stay there, well, how can
Yeah.
you ever do more? And your point with your company, we had that as well. That people were staying, and so people had to leave. Now people would feel bad. They'd come in the office and say, I got an opportunity, and I'm excited for them because I said, I can't give you that.
Yeah.
Go do
Right.
that. And now it makes me so proud to go see some of these people who have, in their new companies, escalate up and go up and take tons of responsibility because I couldn't provide that for them. But I'm
Absolutely.
excited for them. So I think that is the goal for you as a leader. And this is a good little tool for people's toolbox is you have to be willing to let one of your good people go if it's in the
Hmm.
best interest of them.
That happened
Right.
to me. I mean,
Yeah.
that's why I got going. It's there's a massive level. I think that there's a s- personal security, personal confidence is a really big indicator of a good leader. And I'm continually trying to grow in that area. It's very difficult because we
Yeah.
have blind spots and we have insecurities, but you cannot be a good leader if you are massively insecure, and the protectionism that comes when you're threatened by other people's talent and ability, and a lot of that comes by not understanding what you're really good at.
Right.
That's why we see so many breakdowns in large corporations, breakdowns in government, anything that's like that, because everybody's very protectionist about their position. It's like,
Yes.
well, if they get good at it, then what am I going to do? And that kind of selfish mentality never, ever, ever builds a strong company. It doesn't build confidence. It doesn't build trust. It's frenemies, right? It's
Yeah.
building an organization full of frenemies that the clients lose, the team loses, the leader's too weak to actually, if you look at that environment and where that exists, you can absolutely look to the top and be like, well, that's where it comes from. Whenever we're in a
Sure.
restaurant and there's something's going wrong, my wife already knows. She knows what I'm going to say. I'm like, this place is the manager of this place is a very poor leader. Has nothing to do with that dishwasher that just did that or the hostess that did that. It's like this is
Yep.
just a culture where that's allowed to exist. It's the
Sure.
manager's fault.
Sure. And when I go in to help any company, and be it a dealership or I work with other companies, and they say, hey, our team's underperforming, I
Yeah,
immediately, the first place I go is to the manager. I'm like,
all
who's
day.
running the show?
Hmm.
And then I ask them the questions like, do you have processes that are written down? Talk to me about how you train. Talk to me about accountability, because your team's going to do what you let them to do. And
Yeah.
if you take your foot off the gas and start allowing it, it is human nature to do a good job.
Hmm.
But successful companies don't have people just doing a good job. They're
Yep.
being pushed in a positive way, coached to bring more to the table to
Hmm.
grow your business. Now, one thing you did say, and I agree with you. I think insecurity is a really tough thing because the one of the managers I learned the most from was one of the weakest managers I ever worked for,
Mm.
because he kept saying, "But if I teach you everything I know, then they're not going to need me."
What am I gonna do? Right.
Well, they're going to say they're going to fire me. Now,
Yeah.
some companies that protecting is, well, if I could get Paul to do what Glenn does, and Paul
Sure.
only costs 75% of what I'm paying Glenn, I'm saving
Absolutely.
money.
Yep.
But what you're not thinking of is, well, if Paul's only 75%, that means I have to, as a leader, spend 25% of my time helping Paul. Like
Yeah.
we don't add that money in
Right.
there. So
Right.
then talk to me about when you were, that time after, meaning how did you then land? I know you briefly in your intro said I was building a creative agency or had an idea of it while that was happening,
Yeah.
but how did you pivot from, you know the restoring, fixing, helping
Yeah.
fixing cars, all
Reconditioning.
the way
Yeah.
over to now I'm you're known as people right now as someone who's talking about branding and
Hmm.
helping companies with branding, and you're going, well, how did we get over here?
Yeah. So I think that any entrepreneur, any leader that is the evangelist mindset mentality, just intuitively leans towards a storyteller, right?
Right.
I have to bring you into the narrative somehow. And so I think that that was just intuitively a part of my personality. But early on in the reconditioning company, so auto reconditioning for used car dealers. Let's start off. First of all, you have to work for used car dealers, so they're and service managers, and they're not always they're a demanding bunch, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
But definitely, they're going to tell you what they think. You're doing work that was designed to be done inside a controlled environment. You're doing it outside in an upstate New York winter, not fun.
Not fun.
In the summer, heat of the summer, cold of the winter. Um, you're doing hard work. Not to mention, I am new at business, so I don't have a ton of money to pay because I'm in some ways really mismanaging the business.
Right.
Out of being a rookie, and so you also can't make a fortune. And so, how do I get people that are committed to the job, committed to the customers, committed to one another? Well, they have to see that it's worth fighting for the person on the right and the left.
Right.
That was really the first step into branding. Is really basically company culture for me. That was the beginning of the media company that I have now, is that just creating content for us internally and storytelling before it was cool, before we had YouTube, before we had all that
Right.
stuff. So that as that transition, I became a student of branding and marketing and just communicating really.
Right.
And so as I did that internally, people saw that we did it and wanted us to do some for them. And then about let's see, so 2018, probably in about 2016, I started paying attention to the larger automotive industry and started to go on a conference. I met you, went to my
Right.
first conference, and I had no idea about anything. And you were nice enough to tell me about Vista Dash. And I
Right.
was like, oh, I have no idea. Like, this is what's happening in the market. Like just nothing, knew zero. I was the only reconditioner at the place. But started making content, started doing things for other companies, and just we live in a day and age where you can learn anything you want without a college degree. You can
Sure.
learn anything you want. So I just a voracious reader and consumer of content, putting the pieces together. So that as I did that, and the acquisition offer came, I knew that if I put all my time and energy into branding and marketing and starting to really work out my thinking on that, I
Right.
didn't just intuitively know it. You have to work out your thinking on things. Like if you're a leader, you might be naturally have an inclination to something. Like you'd be a great athlete, but you couldn't be a major league ball hitter unless you spent immense amount of time like working out your
Right.
theory of hitting, working out your mechanics and your muscle memory. Same way with anything, being branding and marketer. So I just started working it out, and so it made sense for me that that was something that I liked doing. It was something that I was doing that I saw people paying attention to and follow. And then once I had some resources to the second business that I'm growing, so pivoting to the agency is a lot different. The first one, 15 years,
Right.
right? 15 years of mistakes, 15 years of swinging the axe, bootstrapping it all the way, having my people make a lot more money than me in a lot of cases, right?
Right.
So that I could keep investing it back in the business. Now acquisitions comes, I have some financial resources. This time I said, I want to invest money in the company, really go for it over the next 12 to 18 months, build the team, build the structure so that now in 18 months, we're going to be profitable and be able to run and be set
Right.
up. So a different approach, but like that's why the branding made sense, the marketing made sense, because that's just my natural inclination, right? I like people, I like meeting people, I like bringing people together around a certain topics, and then really the last 18 months is figuring out how to build an operation that could actually execute to that.
So let's talk about that, because I think that sometimes the misconception of someone who's in charge, they have to be a big personality,
Mhm.
right? Versus
Right.
I'm just getting it done, right? So you
Yep.
look at it and say, like you were saying before, I could be the evangelist, but someone has to build the processes, has to execute, and I don't
Yep.
need them to be the big personality. We got that lockdown over here.
Yep.
So talk about that. So if someone's now in charge of, a team, or they're taking over a team, or they're taking over a division within a
Hmm.
company, or
Hmm.
in a dealership, all of a sudden you're the sales manager, pick any title that you want.
Yep.
What's your recommendation to them? Because you hear branding, you hear culture, you hear all these words thrown around, but When you were just talking about it, you're saying, I had to plan this out. So if we are going to give someone who's watching this some tactical steps to say, okay, how did you plan? And maybe even use
Mhm,
the State of the Union, your latest sort of project as an
mhm,
example of saying, I saw a need, I
mhm,
saw an opportunity, I saw the end.
mhm.
How does someone who thinks they know where they're going actually build it, like you said, some tangible things they could learn from your experience?
It's very easy to understand your own thoughts for why or where you want to go. Leadership is about taking that, putting it in a concise format so everyone understands where you're going, and then only then can you lead people there. So I talk about this principle I learned a while ago, years ago, called the 3 levels of unity. And any team that does anything good has to have a level of unity. And that
Right.
unity comes because the leader
Hmm.
unifies them around something. So 3 levels of unity: acceptance, acceptance, agreement, alignment. Acceptance says this: you're the boss, you told me we're going to do it, so I'll do it.
Right.
I accept that you're in charge, right?
Yes.
Very base level of unity,
Right.
right? You can get things done, right? There's not
Absolutely.
insubordination, right? You get the next level up is agreement, where the person says, I accept it because you're the boss, but I also agree that it's the way we should go. So now
Right.
you've convinced me that this is a good decision,
Right.
right? And that I'm going to do it, right? Definitely a step forward, right? And
Yes.
when people agree that it's right, they can be more bought into it. Third level, the one that every leader should strive for, is called alignment. It's a word we hear all the time. And alignment says this: not only I accept it because you're the boss, not only do I agree with it, that it's the way we should go, but I also see it as my responsibility to make sure it happens. And that's alignment. And so every leader should be looking for alignment. And that's everyone on the team understanding that it's their responsibility to make it happen. And so, how does a leader do that? What would I
Right.
suggest to get to that
Exactly.
alignment? You have
Yes.
to put it down on paper. You have to do the work to define where you're going and why you're going there. The second you do that, now you have a common agreed upon thing that not just your idea of what it is and your idea of what it is, it's actually a defined, and that definitely takes work. And most
Yes.
people don't stop long enough to do that work to actually put it together. That's how the State of the Union, the live streaming event that we did, if you go automotivestateoftheunion.com, there's a paragraph on there. I call it the brand pitch, or the narrative that we want
Right.
people to understand. And you read it, and as soon as you read that narrative, you go, I understand
Right.
why this is happening. My team, this is what we're doing. They look at it like, I understand what we're doing. Why should you attend? This is why. You do not have to be an evangelist to do that. And it's, easy for me to be like, well, I rally people around a point. Well, because I do the work to understand it as well. My personality might be one that people might gravitate towards or like believe me. But if you're not wired that way, look, so my company, I don't need a big sales team. Why?
Right.
Because I function as a sales team, right? Or I
Right.
function as the tip of the spear. I get attention, right? And then we have to deliver to what I'm talking
Correct.
about. If For the flip side, you don't have to be. I mean, look at Steve Jobs and Tim Cook, right?
Yep.
Steve Jobs, evangelist leader, visionary, rallied people around this think different mentality.
Hmm.
Ran a very successful company. Tim Cook comes in to take over. Tim Cook, no one's going to argue that he's an evangelist leader. He is not.
Right.
He is an operations minded leader. Guess
Right.
who made the company more profitable? Tim Cook, by a
Absolutely.
mile. By
Of
a
course.
mile, right? So that's just showing like Apple, yes, maybe the evangelist is fun, but when Steve defined why Apple exists, defined the parameters, right? We make things that are beautifully designed, easy to use. We care about how many ports are on the side of it because it matters,
Right.
right? They've taken that. Tim Cook has operationalized it. He's brought in more revenue streams. How can we deploy
Sure.
through the hardware, be a software company? So I think, but he hasn't deviated from the vision that was set in for. I think that's the best example of how, you don't have to be an evangelist leader. So when leaders are coming in, if you're not an evangelist leader, what can you do? You can define what you're doing and why, and then you can do what you do best as an operations guy, and that's just be consistent.
And I think I love that. And so for everybody, like that's great little nugget here for you to focus on, because I think, you know, I think evangelist, or what the perceived of what a leader has to be, this evangelist person. I think that's easy to get agreement, right? Or that first level,
Yes.
because
Yep.
I can get you in the idea, I can sell you the idea,
Yeah.
and then you're
Everybody's
like,
nodding their heads. Yeah.
and you're
Okay.
like,
Yeah. Right.
yeah. But
Yeah.
I think really it's the second piece. It's that agreement, right? Yeah,
Yeah. Yes. Acceptance, agreement, alignment. Yep.
acceptance. Yeah, acceptance is it's a great idea. I love it. And then it's agreement, is that's where it builds, like you said. Yeah, this is a good idea, and this is how we're going to accomplish that. So you're
Yeah,
going to
no,
build.
acceptance is like, you're the boss, you told me what to do.
Yeah,
You're like getting
exactly.
people to agreement. Yeah, agreement is like, okay, or you're fired, right?
Yeah,
It's like,
right. But I think that's where, when you get that point where you've built the structure that they all go, oh, I see how it's going to work, and then they can
Mhm.
start executing on that. Then that alignment comes out of repetition of success, and
Mhm.
also allowing tilts and tweaks, and they have feedback into it. I think where you get to alignment, or where I've gotten alignment the most times, is when I allow that feedback loop to not just be I'm the only one who has a great idea,
Yep.
right? Like you said, you can get results by forcing,
Mhm.
and you'll get a limited amount of people who will follow you, but you're going to churn them out. But
Yep. Oh yeah.
you can be successful by forcing, but
Yep.
that's just wears people down. But if you get to a point of building the structure, and then layer on top of that, everybody has a voice to a point, and
Mhm.
everybody has to be, and we all feel part of it. I think that's where you move to that alignment phase, where everyone goes, I'm a part of it. I don't have to be the leader of it. Like,
Yep.
if you think of a race car, I lived in West Virginia for a while, so I learned about NASCAR.
Oh yeah.
You know, kids in Jersey, we don't know about NASCAR, but it was all about the pit crew.
Yep.
Like, the person who dumped the gas was just as important as the person who's changing the tire can't do anything unless the person with the jack is there, and it gets up, and then we all work together, and boom,
Yep.
nobody's more important. And I've always tried to carry that through my teams, is my job is no more important than yours. I have different things I have to do, but part of my responsibility is being that guide,
Yep.
and being able to watch and tweak and do.
Yep.
But I could be the best leader of I want. If my team's not doing their job, then we fail. Same thing. They could be the best team in the world without me as their guide,
Yep.
then we fail as well.
The
Uh,
best leaders get results. You know what you're talking about right now. I think this is easily missed. Leaders can get very focused on what they want to happen
right.
and ignore the fact and do a lot of talking, especially for an evangelist, right? I want to talk, right? Brian, your brother, me, right? We want to talk, right?
Right.
Right? But leaders listen. And that's the crux. Like, you can define it where you are leading a team of human beings, and you could be the most selfless human being. Every human, though, wants to know, how does this benefit me? How does
Sure.
this move me towards what I want? And alignment can only happen if everyone on that team understands how it benefits them in a
Yes.
positive way. They have to see this as moving them forward, or they will never want to like make it their responsibility to
No.
make it happen. And you do that by exercising empathy and listening. No two people on your team are the same. Everybody is going to want to do it for a different reason. And whether
Yes.
you're an evangelist or an operations guy, actually, you'll probably have an easier time doing this if you're an operations guy, is shutting up and really listening, not just listening, but reading between the lines of your people's personalities and understanding how you can bring them in and align them towards that goal for a
Right.
slightly different reason that this person's aligned, for a slightly different reason than this person's aligned. And that is such a critical element that new leaders could easily get in charge and think it's all about them. Biggest flaw of a new leader thinking like, oh man, because they feel the weight of responsibility.
Yeah,
They're
they
like,
have to prove to their whoever
yes,
hired them that I was the right choice.
yes,
So, when I come in and teach leadership, and people say, "Can
yep,
you come in and teach leadership?" The first thing I tell people to do, if they have the ability, meaning depending on why am I being brought in,
yep.
I always say, don't change anything for 30 days, at least 2 weeks.
Oh, that's so hard to do.
I know it is, but
So hard to
to your
do.
point is, though you save yourself time if you have that ability, or you've been given that ability, meaning that I
Yep.
don't have to flip something around in 30 days. And but if I could, I'd come in and I'd say, well, what were we supposed to be doing? Let me watch, because then you can be more targeted in
Hmm.
your adjustments. You can reinforce what's working,
Yep.
tweak what's not working. But
Hmm.
that's an operational brain thing, and there is that patience thing. And I think going all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, which was knowing yourself and
Without a
understanding
doubt.
that as evangelist, we move at a rapid pace.
Yep.
Like we joke with Brian. Brian's always like, we used to joke, we get calls from the client and they'd say, well, I want this new thing. And we're like, what are you talking about? And Brian had written an article on LinkedIn. I was like, do you think you could tell us before you?
Yeah, because your clients are like, wait a minute, I'm not getting that. Brian said that's a great idea. What's going on
I
here?
know, exactly. So
He's
you
just,
have,
oh man, I
exactly.
can empathize with you. Just lobbing Hail Marys all day into the end zone.
And you're like, well, we used to joke because I would listen. I had to catch myself because with my commute of 45 minutes back and forth to the office, I would listen to podcasts and I'd always have a good idea. And I'd say, all I would get out of my mouth was, oh, I was listening to this podcast, and you just see everybody's eyes go, oh, or
Ah,
what's this? What's this
Glenn
new
heard a
idea?
podcast. Glenn read a book. Right? I know I do this to my team. I know
I
that's
know.
really that's a way. If you don't know how to harness that, you'll burn people out so fast.
Yeah. So I just started to pause, write
Glenn,
it
why don't
down.
you sit on that for 10 days? Actually, just 2 days.
Yes.
Before,
That's what I
yeah.
would do is I would write what I thought was good, think it through, and then
And two
find the
days later,
right.
be like, you know what? Nah, I heard something better already. Right.
Or you just sit there and say, well, how you then become more strategic of how you want to introduce this idea to your team
Absolutely.
versus boom,
Yes.
hey, I got an
Yeah.
idea. I know. I'm sure your team who's watching this is going, he does that. He
Oh,
does
and
that.
I'm a recovering. I admit it. I admit it. I've tried. The more you can have people around you, that'll just be like, hey, it's too much right now.
Oh,
Like bring
you're
it down.
great.
That's a help because I know I do it.
All
But
right.
that, yeah.
So as we wrap up, we touched on a lot of great things today about leaders, about planning, and about, those three levels. So I end every sort of wrap up. We'll let you tell everybody where they can find you as well. But a question I always ask every guest who I've interviewed right now. So you have someone brand new, right? So again, a lot of this focus of this channel is helping those people who all of a sudden are like, congratulations, you're in charge. And you're going, holy God. Either advice that you received from someone, something
Hmm.
you learned.
Hmm.
If somebody came to you and said, all right, I'm in charge, or even you've just promoted someone internally to your team and you said, okay, now you own this.
Yep.
Give me some piece of advice, something tactical, something that would help somebody in their first, say, 30 days of being in charge.
Okay. Number one, start filling your head with good leadership content. It's something that's so easy to do today.
Right.
So control what goes in here and put it all in there, because I think that, like, there's a principle: people like us do things like this. Start listening and consuming and being around other people that are the types of leader you want to be, because if you don't do that, you're going to be in a vacuum and you will be amazed that garbage in, garbage out, right? Stop the Spotify playlist. It's not going to help you
Right.
be a better leader, right?
Right.
Leadership content is something everyone should plug right into. There's no shortage of it. Just start. And it doesn't have to be the best leadership content. You'll find the best stuff as you just starting listening to leadership content. It's the most easily executable thing. I would encourage anyone who's just put in charge, start listening.
Fantastic. And I agree, because I do an exercise when I do my workshop with people on leadership, and I say, okay, I want to take a piece of paper, split it down the middle. On the
Mhm.
right side, you say good, or left side, you say good, bad. And just think
Mhm.
of all the people that you worked for, or
Mhm.
was a manager, or was a teacher, or was a coach, someone
Yep.
that impacted you
Yep.
in a good way. What did they
Yep.
do? Not what they
Yep.
said, what did they do?
Absolutely.
And then same thing for the bad. Oh, and I said, that list is probably going to come really quick. Here's all the thing they did I didn't
Oh
like.
yeah, it's very, very easy. Yeah, it's very
And then I
easy.
would say, here's just a very thing to get out of the gates well. You see that part, that list that says bad?
Yep.
Don't ever do any of those things.
Yep.
Just start there.
Absolutely.
Don't do, because if it bothered you, it's probably going to bother your team. So
Yep.
leave that out there. So Paul, I cannot thank you again. We could sit here and chat all day. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
and it's funny. People say, "Well, how do you talk to people?" I said, there. If you find the people that you connect with, there's
talk all
never
day.
anything. There's no lack of something to talk about. You just look down and
Absolutely.
I go, like I have my little clock here to keep me on
Yep.
time, right? So thank you again. So tell everyone where they can find you, your company, you personally, because again, people should
Yep.
follow Paul. His content's phenomenal.
I appreciate that. Probably the easiest way in the ecosystem is go to pauljdaly, DALY.com. That has links to, all the platforms I'm on. I do a lot on LinkedIn,
Right.
Paul J Daly. I do a lot on Instagram. I put out a podcast. It's my best effort every week. So if you go to pauljdaly.com, you can link out to wherever you like to consume content. I try to make it as easy as possible.
Perfect, perfect. Well, again, thank you so much. And thank everybody. So again, if you, as we always say, if you like this content, please click down below, subscribe, get notifications. I put out new videos every week. Tuesday, it's just me one-on-one with you. And then Thursdays, we bring in a guest and we focus on ways to help you. Please share it with your network because I know there's a lot of people who are in charge now and don't have this type of content. So let's get this out to them. And as always, also, if you have comments below, if there's something you want me to talk about, we can find a guest or we can talk about it. The goal is to help you. So as we wrap up, say at the end of every single episode, you're in charge, but now Paul has given you a few more tools to help you become more successful. Thank you very much for your attention. Have a great day. See you next time. Thanks again, Paul.